Coming up on AVANT Technology Insights with Ken Presti.
It is literally a journey. You are going down a path and building a roadmap towards zero trust.
Don't trust a lot. Don't even trust a little. We're talking about zero trust, and we've got just the guy for that conversation. Zero trust is an IT security strategy that assumes an attacker is already present and that no user or action is trustworthy until properly qualified and authenticated. We talk about how to approach this strategy, how to classify your data, understand the flow of your data, secure the proper analytics, and develop an effective response when things go sideways. By the way, check out the Security 612 report from Avant Research and Analytics. It's a data-driven independent market research study available at www.goavant.net/security-report. And guess what? It covers zero trust. Welcome to Avant Technology Insights. I'm your host, Ken Presti. The link between solving business challenges and cutting-edge technologies has become tighter and more complex than ever before. In this podcast series from Avant Research and Analytics, we help enterprise decision-makers sort through the business case, the value, the challenges, and ultimately the bottom line of technology adoption. So listen to us at your desktop, take us in the car, tune in from the commuter train, or download us at the gate. You'll find us on Apple, Spotify, and Google, as well as in more than 25 countries listening to us right now and available across the globe. My guest today takes on the topic of zero trust from the perspective of a longtime IT veteran with a focus on security and compliance. He's the Chief Information Security Officer at Ntirety, an IT service management company based in Austin, Texas. I want to welcome to the program, Chris Riley. So, Chris Riley, thank you very much for joining us today. Appreciate your taking time out for our interview today. We're talking about zero trust, which on the one hand sounds like something that a divorce attorney would be dealing with. But in reality, it is an IT security strategy. Tee us up a little bit on what zero trust is and how it fits into the bigger picture.
Yeah, so I think NIST has done a really good job kind of just summarizing it, which it assumes that an attacker is present, which is a change in perspective from most security or infrastructure designs, and it puts the enterprise infrastructure forward and requires that no one has any access or is trustworthy until they're qualified.
And as I'm hearing that it's especially important now in these days where people are working from home and everybody is all dispersed and we're very much reliant on the cloud.
Yeah, so the COVID-19 pandemic has forced work from home to really take on a new life on its own. There's serious challenges that come with that, especially when we're talking security and compliance. But it's forcing that infrastructure layer to really flex, whether it's insufficient bandwidth, whether it's VPN, virtual private network connections into the existing enterprise infrastructure, or just simply forcing IT teams to scramble and keep productivity up, access to resources and applications, etc. The fact is, I think the statistic that stuck out in my mind was, in 2019 they said, 1/3 of our workforce has the ability to work truly remote, to be again secure, compliant in that remote environment. That being said, this pandemic is truly forcing that, and so ensuring that what is now a softer and further spread environment is still secure and compliant is really forcing folks to make some hard decisions.
So what would you say to an enterprise decision maker who may be used to more of a perimeter-based approach to security, who now finds himself leveraging the cloud at a higher level, and now obviously perimeter-based security isn't as effective as it otherwise would be? So now here I am scratching my head looking at how I'm going to deal with this. There's a lot of different things out there. You've got SASE, which is starting to emerge, but zero trust is a lot further along in this. how do I go about ascertaining what it is that I need to do, the amount of money that I need to spend, and what I need in terms of talent in order to bring it all together?
Right. So security is hard to begin with, and going to a zero trust model, which basically says, hey, unless you're granted specific and inherent permission, you don't have access. That workforce enablement, that's a hard pill to swallow. Denying somebody access to a resource that they may have had previously, that's a big challenge, and security is already hard. So it's a true shift in that paradigm of security. It's getting that top down buy-in, and more importantly, it's wrapping a programmatic response around security. So it requires, especially in that hybrid environment that you kind of lined out, it requires a handful of things. And I think, well, I think Forrester a couple of years ago kind of laid out, hey, you've got to do, these criteria. I think there's 5. It was identify sensitive data at rest and in motion, map the acceptable routes for your egress and ingress points, or how you're going to access that data, and then architect those micro perimeters or segments to be zero trust. And then it's to monitor and get those security analytics, and then automate as best you can so that you can have an active response into it. And as we start to have the conversation around what does it take to get to that zero trust model, a lot of times I start with some of what I think are the fundamentals. Can an organization see some of that lateral movement, whether it's user, whether it's data? What's behind that perimeter, wherever it's defined, cloud, traditional, castle mentality, co-location, all of those come into play. And it's about that point where we get into the conversation and I say, can you see the lateral movement of your users, your devices, et cetera? And they get this quizzical look on their face. And that's when we step back and we talk about, so what is the infrastructure layer? How do you want to accomplish this? And I say, it's a journey, just like going into the cloud, going into the hybrid environment. The architecture, taking the time initially to architect it appropriately and apply the technology, the people, and the process. I know it sounds cliche, but it's applicable to a zero trust model. It is really imperative.
So the basic premise, as I understand it, is that the bad guys are already in, and if they're actually not already in, that's gravy. So you're essentially defending it at a different point in the network because of all the different permutations of where the data lives and where it goes. Help me unpack how that works. So let's say, I'm sending a message to you across a zero trust network. How is it going to behave differently as compared to your basic moat and castle type of environment?
Right. And that's a great analogy. So traditionally, the enterprise network has had a focus on that perimeter defense. So authenticated users are given access to the broad collection of enterprise resources, and therefore they have unrestricted lateral movement once they're on that quote unquote network. And the biggest challenge with that is you lose when they're going east to west in that traffic pattern, that behind the perimeter, if you will. You lose the visibility, and if you don't have it, that's a risk. And so bad actors have been taking advantage of that. They've been gaining access, getting privileged accounts, and then making that lateral move and pivoting up into the infrastructure layer.
So let me break in for just a minute. When you say going the east to west, is that about engaging different types, different devices that I may be holding? Is that different people on my team? What do you mean by east to west?
Yeah, great question. So the east to west, that's the lateral traffic. Once you're in the infrastructure and you're behind that perimeter device, traditionally has been a firewall. Once you're in that network layer, you can move across, whether it's a file share, whether it's Active Directory, whether it's domain controllers, whether it's file shares, whether it's application layers, whatever has inherent permissions within that network layer, you get to utilize. So that's what I mean by that lateral or that east to west traffic.
Okay. Okay. So as they're working on this and as they're assessing whether or not this is the right way to go, or is it really a question of that? Is this just the right thing for people to be doing at this time? What are their other options? Are they being, forced in this direction? Perhaps not at gunpoint, but for all intents and purposes and practical matters. Where does that fit?
Yeah. So with the access layer, being able to see it's a shift in the paradigm, if you will, to believe that you are already in a vulnerable state. That's a hard transition for security folks to make, especially when you're going up into those lines of business, saying, "Hey, we need to shift our access layer. We need to shift or transition to more of a zero trust model." To be able to do that, it basically assumes that there's no trusted access, whether it's a user, whether it's an asset, whether it's an application, all of them, unless there is distinct permissions granted, they can't make that connection. And so it requires organizations to, one, have a very mature understanding of what their data is, what that flow of that data is, and then in addition to have the visibility into their user base, into their application layer, and then across that data flow.
What does it mean to the users of the technology? So, not just the IT people, not just the security people, but the people that are actually using the applications in the business setting. Are they more likely to run into obstacles in terms of gaining access? Are they more likely to have to authenticate more frequently? What does that mean?
Yeah, so great question. So the per session authentication is really the critical, meaning that every time you connect, regardless of your location, regardless of your device, that's a new session and you're granted access based on that new session criteria. As I said earlier, security is hard, and to deny somebody access to something, oftentimes that becomes an issue. We've the environment of saying no, that shifted 10 years ago. We had to enable the business as a CISO, as security and compliance professionals. We had to enable the business to go forward as fast as they could by and provide those guide rails, provide the correct security posture, compliance posture, without having to say no. And now with this zero trust model, you run into that user, that application, that data stream doesn't have access. So when I say you have to have a pretty mature organization to understand it, or you have to have kind of a greenfield landscape to architect it from the ground up in a zero trust model, that's really pretty critical.
You mentioned that's an interesting point you bring up, because one of the things that we always look at on this podcast is, what does it look like on a spreadsheet? And we want to think that the security of the data is going to be preeminent in this kind of a discussion, but we've got budgetary realities out there. Is this something that I'm really going to have to plan for in advance and bring in a substantial budget in order to bring in and to make that happen? Because that's one of the things that pertains to security. Security is the kind of thing where you have to move fast, and budgets often get dragged along, or it doesn't happen at all.
Right. And in addition to that, if you have an organization that, let's say they're trying to move to a zero trust model, but they're trying to leverage the technical debt that they already have. So whether that's, they've got an investment in their network layer or their applications, they've made a move to the cloud. You've now got to get all of these legacy components to communicate, to be able to authenticate not only with each other but also encrypted. And you have your peer-to-peer technologies, and you bring in or then wrap around a lot of what is role-based access into that, and you have to be sure that everything can communicate. So there's not only the cost of getting the right knowledge and the tools, but then potentially having to update or upgrade the environment to support it.
What does it play well with and what does it not play well with? I mean, so anybody that's out there pretty much has some security infrastructure out there already. Does it work well with multi-factor authentication? Am I looking at a re-architecting of my whole approach to security, or is this something that I'm adding on perhaps in a hybrid environment that's going to be relatively easy to adopt?
I try to frame it up as it is literally a journey. You are going down a path and building a roadmap towards zero trust, meaning you're restricting access to choice D, all of the above. And in order to do that, you have to have some level of access control, access management, privilege access management, remote access. All of those components come into this. You have to then be able to understand your landscape, and you have to apply or create your minimizing that risk to the environment, the infrastructure, your application, your user base, being able to differentiate all of those and control the security around them at a finite layer. And then last, you have to understand how that data is going to flow across it, encrypting it, preventing those attack vectors from being leveraged, and understanding how they would be leveraged, even if there's encryption, even if there's user access, even if there's a system level access gained. So it's really taking components of your architecture up into the cloud, down onto the perimeter, and defining and creating that roadmap into a lower trust or zero trust model.
What form factor does it take? And that's an especially critical question these days because we can't get within 6 feet of each other. What in terms of getting all this set up? I mean, what is this pretty dynamic? Do we need people to be dealing with whatever data center may be left over within the company? What does it take to get this thing up and running from a physical point of view?
Yeah, it takes they say it takes a policy engine, a policy administrator, and a policy enforcement point. But depending on the environment. There's no one size fits all. It's literally taking down to the component layer and understanding how all these things are going to play nicely, especially as you start restricting access to them, and understanding your user access, understanding your administrator access, breaking those dynamics apart, and then understanding how the devices inherently talk to each other. And we've gotten a lot better at doing that. You said kind of what form factor does it come in? We've gotten a lot better at understanding that, and then the data flow that goes along with it, whether it's driven from the privacy need, whether it's because we've gone into that hybrid environment and our SaaS applications or our hybrid cloud functionality is there. But it's then further defining that functional component out of each one of those. And like I said, it's easier to get to the zero trust model when you're architecting from the ground up, greenfield, brand new environment. But these organizations that are often fairly sprawled, they're growing through M&A. We're all remote now, so there's a whole nother layer that comes into that equation that has to be considered and has to be dealt with to gain access.
You mentioned the word policy a moment ago. That's an interesting thing because aside from the bits and the bytes and the technical side of it, there's the business aspect of it. And at some point, they've got to sit down and work out this particular aspect. If I'm an enterprise decision maker looking at zero trust, I need to bring in a couple of different people, I'm guessing. And what goes into building those policies so that they make sense both from a technical aspect and also from the business aspect? And how would I architect those policies?
Yeah, pretty much start at the top and ensure that the organization is ready to start denying access. And once you get that head bob, it then becomes the ability to execute against it. And I said taking apart the environment, understanding the data flow and the access layer, but then it's turning around and saying, okay, if somebody can't get to that and they are unable to perform their job, what is our mechanism for approval? What is our mechanism then to turn around or grant access? How do we do it? You certainly can't do it at an individual layer across an enterprise of 10,000 people. That would be mind-numbing. So you have to kind of come up with that rule set that will allow your organization to still be successful and move forward.
Which roles in my company should be involved in building those policies?
Yeah, choice D, all of the above. So each each line of business is going to have an understanding of what their business critical applications are and how they interact with the data. Then you turn around and if you haven't segmented, there's no micro segmentation within the organization. Then it's now you're creating those buckets of lines of departments, whether it's finance, whether it's HR, whether it's sales, whether it's infrastructure support, whether it's NetOps. All of a sudden, you are micro segmenting out this portion of your business. And when I say all of the above, it really does take the conversations not only down to that layer, but unless you're a subject matter expert in how those lines of business interact with the data pools or gain access to the applications, it can be a monumental project.
Okay, so let's say I'm an enterprise decision maker. I've been kicking tires on zero trust for a while now. I've decided that this is the way to go. I've got a couple of different options out there in terms of how I'm going to set this up and fulfill it, in terms of whose solutions I'm going to use. Not asking for specific vendors that I should be looking at, but what are the evaluative criteria that I should be taking into account when I'm making my selection?
Yeah, so you need technology that can get down to the most granular level, and a lot of tools they allow you to do that now. I think it was a very hot topic this year at RSA 2020, and the technology vendors are now seeing that they not only have to play nice in amongst the background, but they have to be able to interpret that traffic access data at a more finite level.
Any other specific features or benefits, I guess, go with the territory, but specific features that you think they need to look at?
Yeah, everything from privileged access management to that device that allows you to create that segmentation. Traditionally, we've used a firewall, but firewalls have now expanded in whether it's virtual, whether it's appliance, whether it's truly a cloud function. Those items we need to shift our perspective from that castle mentality and really take it to the infrastructure layer. That being said, it is a journey. So organizations need to understand that it's going to take them some time. If your program is just starting out, turning access off or not trusting anybody's access can really be dangerous. At the same time, if you're going through the process, and GDPR kicked a lot of this off for us when we talked about data flow and what applications have access to PII data, we now became more granular in how we're interacting with that, and it's enabled this conversation to not only take place across those lines of business without business owners shaking their head no right off the bat, but it's enabled our security and technology stack to be more intelligent.
Chris Riley, Chief Information Security Officer at Ntirety. Great job. Thank you for all the insights on zero trust security in this cloud generation and in this working from home era. Some great insights, and we thank you for your time today, sir.
Thanks, Ken. Appreciate it.
For more information and data on IT security, please check out AVANT's 612 report developed by AVANT Research and Analytics. Download that from www.goavant.net/security-report. You've been listening to AVANT Technology Insights with Ken Presti, featuring information and opinions on how key technologies can be leveraged to solve business problems. AVANT Technology Insights is a service of AVANT Communications, an IT decision-making platform for next-generation technologies. All opinions expressed are those of the guests and the host. For more information, please visit www.goavant.net. That's www.goav as in victory, ant.net. For AVANT Research and Analytics, this is Ken Presti.